Hi everybody, it's Franny, and we're back to finish up the rebuild of our Porsche 3.2 Carrera engine. We still have a few things to do today. We've got tin to put on. I have some of the heating system that needs to be attached as well. Our muffler needs to be attached properly as well. Then, we get to put on the intake manifold, so that's going to be great fun. And then, let's see, so we'll have a distributor cap we need to put on and all the wires for the spark plugs and such. So we have several things we need to get done today. I'm going to start with installing this big cowling piece here. It sort of slides up underneath here and is held on with I think 5 different bolts. We have a bunch of these smaller 10mm with a captured washer, and that's what we're going to use to install these. I went back and looked at my video again, the raw footage, and watched myself putting the bolts into a little metal container, and sure enough I could see the different sizes of each of them. So I think I've got them right. It just slides underneath in here. Pretty simple. Now for this piece, the most part, they're the little shorter bolts here. Well, I think the hot setup there is to get these 2 bolts in the center in first. They're the only ones actually on holes. The other ones are actually on slots. So put the 2 center ones in first, and then the rest of them will fall into place. Now, since the other side tin pieces connect into this rear apron here, I think what I'm going to do is leave these a little bit loose so I can move them around a little bit, get our side apron pieces in, and then we can go ahead and tighten everything down all at once. And if you're looking at your 2 tin pieces here and you're wondering, well, which one goes where? I can't remember which one goes on which side. There's going to be a hole in one of them here, this big hole here, and that is for the oxygen sensor, and that's on the left side of the engine because that's where the cat is, over on that side. This side skirt tin screws into the engine head here with 3 bolts. Now these are going to be a little bit longer than our normal tin bolts, and then it slides into the apron piece up here, which we've already got on, and there's some captured nuts here, so we're going to slide this guy on and lock all this stuff down. On the end here, there's a couple more captured nuts on the end of this tin. I'm just going to put our last 2 short little bolts in there. I want to make sure I don't lose them. Just something to keep in the back of your noggin when you're putting your tin back in. I had somebody write in and say that in order to do the valves while the engine's in the car, it's way easier if you remove this tin. Then you've got access to both the top and the bottom simultaneously from inside the engine bay. And I thought that was a great idea. So just kind of keep in mind what would be required to remove this particular tin piece. But getting this guy out, it's going to be 2 bolts on the end, 2 bolts here, and 3 along the bottom there. Tin on the left side is pretty much the same as it was on the other side. We have to slide it in first, then lay it up against the engine head here, and then we'll be attaching it in the back as well. Well, yay, with our tin on, let's go ahead and turn the engine upside down because we still have a few bits underneath the engine to do. In the last video, we got our heat exchangers installed. Next, what I want to do is get this big heat exchanger cross-pipey guy installed as well. Now, it kind of just hooks up on the 2 ends there with these 2 ends here. This bit here goes through the big hole in the tin underneath. When I put the muffler on the last episode, I put this strap on the left-hand side mostly because it was far away from our connection over here to the cat. I just wanted to kind of balance it out a little bit. But this strap actually doesn't go here, it goes here. And this big strap here that we need to put on is quite a bit bigger actually because it goes around that pipe when it's in. It kind of all makes sense once it's all together. But our first step is going to be to loosen up this strap and get it over ready to place on this side. Well, it looks like we have everything in place with our straps here. Now these actually have a torque value to them. And also they say you should lubricate the threads. So let's go ahead and pull these bolts back out again and lubricate them a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and torque them down. With these cinched down, I'm going to use a 15mm to hold the little nut here on the bottom, and then I've got my torque wrench here set to 40 Nm or 30 foot-pounds. With those straps on, let's go ahead and get to our hose clamps here. The next thing we need to install is this rubber coupler here, and it goes on the other side, so let's go ahead and turn the engine back right side up. Here's the heat pipe coming through the tin. Look at that. It's like really well centered all the way around. That looks great. Well, the orientation of the screw on the clamp here is kind of a thing. If it's too far on this side, then this bolt is in the way. I think this is actually going to work here. So let's go ahead and seat this guy all the way down. It's got to go partially through the tin. There we go. All right. Just want to press it on and make sure it's seated all the way around the tin and flat. Okay, sort of screw this down. All right, that's good and tight, and the band of our clamp is sitting within the little slots here. Make sure this is tight enough just that it doesn't come out. There we go. That should keep anything from falling in there. Next, I'm going to install the oxygen sensor. It just screws in here on the top of the cat. Nothing really remarkable about this. One of the nice things is, since we have so much access here, we can just put a wrench on it. It's 22mm, so it's fairly large. So we'll go ahead and cinch this down. Couldn't find a torque spec for it, so I'm going to kind of treat it a bit like a spark plug. Just sort of cinch it down. It feels like it's tight. That feels pretty good. Doesn't have to be crazy tight. The wire for the oxygen sensor goes through this hole right here in the tin. And then we just need to work in our little rubber cap. Make sure it's seated all the way around. There it is. And finally, there's a little cover that goes over the O2 sensor here, and the outside shield of it points to the outside. So it's just a little clip in there, and we just clip it into place. There we go. And that's that. The last piece of tin we need to install is this big honkin' piece. Now this is a cover for the catalytic converter. Goes over it something like this, something like that. And remember, we installed our two brackets, one here and one there. That's what that was for. But all of our hardware on this thing was completely destroyed. I mean, they were totally destroyed. I'd never seen stuff so rusted. It really is comprised of just 3 bits, sort of a standard 10mm bolt here and a washer, fine. But it's these guys here, these sort of snap nut guys, clip-on nut things, whatever they're called, that fit over these holes that really hold everything together. And these things were so rusted, and the bolts were rusted. The whole thing was just an absolute disaster. You might notice these two brackets are new because both of them were cracked. And even this piece has a slight crack in it right here, which might cause me some issues. I'm not sure about that. I'd hate to have to replace this entire piece just because of this. Maybe I can get that spot welded if it's an issue in the future. But the reason it broke was because our original bracket was broken. In fact, it was cracked off completely on one side. So that would explain why this thing got kind of jacked up. So our process for all this is going to be to put in our captive nuts, those little clip nutty guys first, and then we just put the piece on. Well, that's it for the tin, and that's really kind of it for the bottom of the engine as well. We still have one very important piece to put on the top, so that's going to be next. Let me go ahead and rotate the engine back, and we'll get to that. Now, for the moment I know I've been waiting for. Remember our friend, the intake manifold? It's time for that to go on now. It's not all that much. We just basically need to set it on top and lock it down, but there are a few other things we need to connect. I have a new set of gaskets and also the spacers. Now, when I took the spacers off originally, they looked fine. I didn't see anything wrong with them, but they need to be absolutely flat or they can leak. And if they leak, then you get air in and then the engine just runs crummy. So I decided to just go ahead and get a new set of these things and not mess with the old ones. It's gasket, spacer, and then the gasket as well. So let's go ahead and get all those put in. Now it's important to note there's a cutout here, and that's for the injector. So our gasket also has a little cutout on that side as we place this little guy down there. All right. But more importantly, the spacer also has sort of a chamfer cut in there. And it's different on one side than it is on the other. So we want this side up and that side down. So the one with the chamfer and sort of that cutout, we want that to the top, just like that. And then our gasket goes over the top of that like that. Hey Heidi, can I borrow you for a second? I have my lovely assistant Heidi, and she's going to give me a hand putting this thing on. There's some wiring and stuff that kind of has to snake its way through, and it's pretty hard to do with one person. If you've got somebody to help you with it, it makes it a lot easier. All right, let's go ahead and get this on. Okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and line it up. There. There it goes. Okay. All right, there we go.
Okay, these are out of the way, hopefully.
Yes, good, good. They'll snake through the back there.
And then...
This guy's out of the way, and that goes through there. And then there's a clamp here, and it actually attaches somewhere. I forget where up there. So, all right, well, that's it. Wow, it looks awesome. Big thanks to Heidi for helping me put that on. It kind of has to drop straight down. It really can't go on one side and then the other, and so really kind of this is a two-person job. So at any rate, it's on. We're gonna go ahead and get our washers and our cap nuts on and torque them all down. I'm reusing the original cap nuts. They were in excellent shape, and I just had them replated. In addition, there's kind of a special washer. It's very thick that goes on as well, so we'll put our washers and our cap nuts on. The next step will be to cinch them all down, and then we'll go ahead and torque them. I ended up removing the air box here that's attached to the airflow meter on this side. I think that just gives me a lot more access on this right side of the engine, because this is pretty cramped over there, and it's easy enough to take this off. All right, we've got all of our cap nuts cinched down. Let's go ahead and torque it. It's 25 Newton meters or 18 foot-pounds. And that's it, all 12 nuts torqued. Yay! Next, we have a few little wiring issues. We've got our sensors here. We need to get those through. They're now sitting way over here. They need to go through. There's also a clamp for them as well. So let's get them routed and clamped down. All right, you guys go through here. Like that, and then this one comes through here as well. And on top of that, there's another wire here. This is actually for that helper motor that goes up here for the heating system. So it's also on this particular clamp here. Before I clamp these guys down, I think I want to get them into the harness here first. Now the order is very important. The very first one at the top here is our temperature sensor, and it's only a 2-pin connector, so it's pretty obvious. It's the only place it can go. Now the other two, there is a thing about these two. They're exactly the same, but they send different information. One is the speed sensor and the other one is the position sensor. Porsche calls it DG and BG. And the DG goes here, and the BG goes on the bottom. They're also indexed as well. They have a little pin right here, so they only go into this connector one way. All right, there we go. That's that guy and that guy. And then there's this little metal gate that sort of slides in behind them and locks them in place. Boy, that is fiddly. All right, there we go. And then we can push that in. So it'll snap towards the end. Just needs to go. There it goes, snap. There it goes. Okay, great. Snap, snap. All right, well, these connectors are in. Let's go ahead and put our clamp in. Okay, there we go. Locked in place. All right, the next one we need to lock down is this wire here, which is our main bus actually, and it just clamps on to a little protrusion here from the fuel injection rail. There we go. We have a few things to do here in the back of the engine. First thing I want to do is there's a bracket here that needs to attach to the throttle bell crank assembly back here. So let's go ahead and pop this nut off and get our bracket back on. With that guy in, we also have a couple of springs we have to attach. There's little tabs that sit down underneath the intake manifold, and these springs come back to this throttle bell crank. So we have to attach both of these springs. The long end of the spring goes on the intake side, and the little short end is going to go on our bell crank side. All right, well, with our springs in place, let's go ahead and pop on our ball joint here. There it goes. Snap. All right, and there's our throttle linkage and bell crank all ready to rock and roll. The final thing I want to do for today is to install a new set of spark plug wires. I also have a new cap and a new rotor. So we're going to be installing our rotor first, then we're going to put our cap on, and then what I'm going to do is just route the wires, and they plug into the cap according to the firing order. The rotor is straightforward enough. Just go ahead and pull it out. Now, something I want to show you that's important is there's a notch here right there at the bottom of the distributor, and on the cap there's also a notch right here as well. So the cap is going to be going on like that. It can only go on one way. All right, we can reinstall our dust cap here and then just push our rotor on. Make sure it locks into position. Now we just want to keep in mind that this is basically cylinder number 1. It's just a little bit past, but our notch is right here. Now we remember our indexing notch is down there at the bottom, so this is going to go on like this. There it goes. Okay, so that one is locked in. There we go. I think that's it. You can kind of see the hook down there and how it's hooked on that little flange that's down there. And then the other side is similar, same thing. To get each of the spark plug wires in the right spot, we start with cylinder number 1. Now that's right above our rotor. Then we just follow the firing order. Next is cylinder 6, so trace that wire all the way back to the distributor cap, and it goes in the position 1 over clockwise from number 1. Then we just continue through the firing order with the next cylinder 2, 4, 3, and 5. And finally, we add the coil wire to the center. Well, that's pretty much it for the engine. I'm really excited with how it turned out. I think it looks awesome. Now, it's just about ready to go in the car. There's a couple of little tubes and things that need to be installed, but I'm gonna wait until we're ready to put the engine in the car. And speaking of that, that's what's coming up. So we're gonna be painting the car, and that means anything that touches paint has to come off the car. So there's gonna be a lot of work to disassemble the car, and that means lots more videos. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that now. Hit the little bell next to it to be notified because you're not going to want to miss a minute of this content. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. And if you got any questions or comments, of course, just leave them down below and I'll get right to them. All right, and as always, a very special thank you to our Patreon supporters. Okay, well, until next time, safe travels. Bye.